Underrated, we the underdogs, underestimated.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Totem Podcast Today, kind of going in some topics of what's kind of going on with today's world. We got a special guest for you. Like always, we got Eric. How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you guys doing? You know, we're just so you guys know, we're on YouTube and Spotify, you know, both as the Totem Podcast. So be sure to check us out on there and subscribe to our channel, and make sure to hit the bell for notifications so that way you can be notified every time we bring a guest like we have on today. And, you know, if we bring you value, if you learn something, if we made you laugh, if we made you think, we would appreciate it if you could share it with at least one other person to just get the message out there.
Yeah, so with today's guest, I mean, last guest we had on was pretty good, like with today's topic we had going on. And this guest we have is we've turned it more into just like a professional, but a friend. I think I can call him a friend now. We're friends. So Nathan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Monica. And I definitely consider you a friend. So appreciate that you see me that way too.
No, I was just gonna say, for the people who don't know you, if you could just give like a brief explanation of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Nathan Beauchamp. I'm the owner and managing broker of a mortgage lending office in Lakewood, Colorado. I've worked in lending my entire professional career, which is about 20 years. I've worked as an underwriter, an account executive, and a loan producer, now a small business owner.
No, that's great. That's great. So pretty much I guess two people like that don't know you, like where's your business at? What do you like? You mean what services do you offer, stuff like that?
Basically, anyone who owns a home or wants to own a home. So I help people either secure the financing to purchase a home, upgrade the home they have now, refinance, which right now isn't a lot of that, but you know, a couple years ago when rates were at their all-time low, basically my entire book of business, we were replacing the rate they had then with a new lower rate. So if you own a home, you're going to need me at some point. Or if you want to own a home.
So with a lot of people, like you're saying, the refinancing stuff, like since you're kind of in that industry, like me and Eric were talking about it, we're like, what better than to have like with this stuff going than like a professional in this? Because I mean, we can just be sitting here talking shit, but I mean, it's not like a professional telling us like what's actually going and the whole. Because people just see it and they just see like, oh, house for sale, but they don't know there's a whole process behind that.
Right. Yeah. So I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, and it is a new sort of language, and it can be daunting and confusing and scary when you have the dream of owning a home, but you don't know what it's going to take. So I guess I think of myself more as a consultant than a salesperson, because I'm not trying to talk someone into buying a home or owning a home. It's more like they've decided this is the next step for me, the next step for my family, and I'm there to give them the best advice I can and try to connect them to the right loan for their circumstances. So I'm not really selling so much as explaining, consulting, and then connecting them to a product. So that's one of the differences. So if you're thinking like you're out there and you're like, okay, I see there's Chase on the corner and there's Wells Fargo. Do I go there to get my loan? Or there's American Finance and I see them on television and, you know, John Elway's in their commercials. Do I call them, or Nova or New American Funding, or it's going to kind of these bigger companies? Or do I call a mortgage broker? What's the difference? In simple terms, if you go to Chase, you're going to get a loan that is backed by Chase. They're lending their money, they're holding that loan, they're going to service it, and they're a big bank with a lot of expenses, fancy buildings, a lot of people in the food chain who all need to make money off of that one transaction. If you go to, American Finance or New American Funding, same thing is true. They might have one or two more products than a Chase does, but you're really limited to what that particular lender has to offer. If you go to a broker, I don't have an affiliation with any one bank. I don't have any reason to put you into a loan with I don't know, any of the end investors that we use over any other. It's really like, okay, of the 40 or 50 different banks that will do Monaco's loan, which one of them has the best rate, which one of them has the lowest costs, which one of them has the best process, and of those three things, how many of them can we get all at the same time? So you're kind of hiring me to do the shopping part of the process for you, instead of you have to call bank after bank after bank and then compare it and try to see what's best. I'm really kind of coming to you having said, hey, I've looked at 40 different options. Here are the 2 or 3 that are the best. So sorry, that was a little long-winded.
No, you're good. No,
That's perfect.
you got it in depth good.
I think one of the powerful things you said was that you're not like convincing people that they have to buy a house or anything. You're more there like as a consultant for them, because it's like the same thing we talked about with Christina last week, that
You just want to educate the consumer, the client, the person, you know.
Yeah, it might come with the years you have in the industry, that like you come to realize that it's not about selling something or convincing somebody to do something, but it's more about caring about your clients and what do they actually want or what do they actually need.
I think if you sell someone something, then you might be selling them the wrong thing, you know, and it might not be in their best interest. And I'm relationship oriented, so I don't ever want to have somebody come back to me and be like, why did you convince me to do this thing over here? It was not good. I want somebody to come back to me because they remember that I listened, that I respected what they wanted, and that I helped them get what they themselves decided they wanted, not I pushed them into something. So, you know, it might sound a little corny, but like if I wouldn't take the loan myself, I'm not going to ask someone else to.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to look at pretty much like anything in life, not just something like this, but like if you're not going to do it yourself, why would you tell somebody else to do it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of salesmanship in maybe every industry. In lending, there certainly is. You know, you've got kind of these boiler rooms, tons and tons of dudes behind desks making calls and, you know, just asking for people's business. And I've never been wired for that. I much prefer, the bulk of my business comes from direct referral. So in other words, I've done a loan for someone, and when their child needs a loan, then they contact me. Or when they need a loan in the future, they contact me. And the way that you accomplish that is by bringing value. Right? Like what you guys want to do with this podcast. You want to put something out in the world that people pay attention to because they're being fed by it. So if somebody's being fed by what I have to say, or the insight that I bring, or the leverage that I have on product, that's a good reason to have them come back. I don't want to be calling people and bugging them for business. I want to have given enough value that when someone needs my services, they think, oh, well, I have the person for you. Let me tell you why this person is going to do well by you. So if you, if you do what you say you're going to do more often than not, and if you bring value more often than not, then I think you succeed.
Yeah, just walk the walk. It's pretty much. But with all that, like you were saying, like how you're saying there's a lot of people, like, because we know like the industry pretty much got like, I don't know if out of control is the right word, but it got pretty crazy. And like you were saying, there was just a lot of people just trying to sell. Do you think kind of like in the way that stuff is looking right now, like people are going to start getting weeded out? Like, because I mean, when there's, I picture it this way. There's 100 people looking to get a loan, but there's 500 people trying to give a loan. Only out of those 500, the best are going to come out. Like, there's going to be 400 people that don't get it, and it's probably because they weren't the best.
Yeah, I mean, when market conditions are good, it's easy to succeed, right? Like right now, if you're a contractor, you can have as much work as you want whenever you want because there's just so much interest in people doing things to their homes. It's slowing down a little bit, but, you know, kind of with COVID, everybody is thinking about their home in a different way. I'm here all the time. What upgrades can I make? How can I make this space, serve my needs better? How can I add something fun to make it more comfortable to be here all the time? And so basically, in a nutshell, there's just endless amounts of work for contractors. So even if you are a poor contractor in terms of the quality of what you provide, you can go get work and you can get paid for it. Doesn't mean that people like it, but you can go get those jobs. And the same is true in I guess the real estate market, there's
in all industries pretty much. I think like you were just might sound messed up, but you were just successful because there was a need in the market, but not because you're necessarily as good.
There's people that's true of.
Yeah.
I guess I like to believe that most people that are doing a profession at, I don't know, when you're dealing with somebody's most important financial transaction, I guess my hope would be that the vast majority of the players are reasonably skilled and have a real professional skill set, but it's not always true. I run into things that shock me, once a month about, I'll hear a client story where I'm like, I cannot believe that that's what's happening for you. And there is a weeding out that happens when market conditions change, right? So 2 years ago, rates at their all-time low, for as long as the U.S. has been tracking rates on 30-year conventional mortgages, were at 2.5, 2.75 for a really qualified borrower. Nobody ever thought we would see a 2% rate on a 30-year loan. And so in that market, everybody should refinance, right? Like literally anyone that owns a home should be refinancing.
Yeah.
So there's just a glut of business, and you can be bad at what you do and have business. Now, when rates have effectively doubled from that low point, and now 5.5 sounds horribly high to people, despite the fact that it's about the average over 40 years. So it's not high, but it's perceived as high. There's a lot less business, right? Mortgage applications are at their 22-year low. So there's less business, and it does weed out the weak hands, and that's really good for people like me. I've been through market cycles twice now.
Just like I'm ready. I'm ready. So that's kind of another thing I kind of wanted to ask you, because there's a lot of people, like we're saying, they were successful because of the market, but I've talked to some lenders myself that they say that there's like 75% of their business was coming from like refinance. Mm-hmm. That like it's good because there's a market, like we're saying, there's a market for it. But what's gonna happen when it flips, or you're just going to like just someone buying a house when there is no refinancing? Like their team gets cut.
Right. Yeah, and that's happening, at large lenders. It's happening at small lenders. Yeah. Everybody's kind of tightening belt because there is just less business.
Yeah, like Chase had it. They had an article the other day that they were laying off 10% of their
production staff.
Yeah. So it's like they're seeing it's not too crazy, but it's like because they were getting a lot of refinance. I don't know.
Well, it's not just banks, it's like the whole just economy in general. There's just been like a slowdown in people like hiring new hires and stuff like that. There's even been like articles saying that there's bigger companies like rescinding offers that they had for potential employees just because like the market's starting to slow down.
Yeah, and we're focusing on like what you do, but I mean it's not just happening with you. It can happen. It's good if it happens with you. It's gonna happen everywhere, like in all of the industries. I believe it's just a matter of time, but. I mean, since we have you here, that's why we're kind of like based on that. Well,
I guess my question for you, I mean, you interact with a lot of businesses, right?
Yeah.
Different types of businesses. Is it harder to get a business to commit now to investing in marketing than it was before because people are tightening their belts? Or is it the opposite because, hey, there's less business, so people are spending money on marketing in order to get more business? Like, what are you seeing?
So kind of like what, I'll let you answer your thing here in a little bit, Eric, but kind of what I see, since I'm Eric's the technical part of it. What I see when I go with somebody, so it's kind of like, I guess I could say like a little consulting before, like who's your audience, who's your targeted audience, what's their goals, what do they want to do, like do they want to grow more? Because then there can be some like, oh, we don't need that right now, and then like you said, there's the other businesses like, hey, it's game time, baby, like let's go, like because they've kind of lived through it. But I mean, you're just gonna have a little bit of both. There's gonna be people that try to be more conservative, and like sadly I think those are the people that are just gonna, if they're not that big or that known by themselves, I think they're just gonna start disappearing.
Well, that's kind of like one of the I guess, like truisms of business is that the first thing that people cut is marketing budget, which is kind of like, hey, I'm bleeding out over here. Let me slash my other arm open, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's just accelerating the problem. It feels like if there's less business, you have to be more proactive about trying to get it. And one way you can do that is let people know you exist more often, right?
Yeah. And then that's the kind of thing, like what I'm saying, like sit down, we just have a conversation, like where are you trying to go, where are you trying to take your business? Like what's your budget? Like a lot of, like even like smaller businesses, they don't have a budget. They don't even know what they could spend on something. So you tell them a price and they're like, oh, that's crazy. In reality, it's actually less than what you should. I mean, I think businesses, like kind of number wise, they should at least have like 10%. Like
going towards marketing.
Mm-hmm. That's just kind of to sustain,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of their revenue. But I mean, if you want to grow a little bit more, I mean, it's like everything. We want to get a little bit more ripped. I mean, we're gonna have to lift a little bit more weights, So it's like, but I mean, it's just hard when you see it because sometimes they see it as an expense instead of an investment. Mm-hmm. Because how people is now, I want it now.
The instant gratification. The instant results.
So like I put this, say if we make a commercial video, I put this video up and it only has 100, 200 views. Like, well, it's because you never made any videos before. It's going to be hard to get the first one to just go.
Or it could be also because they've like really never been active on their social medias or anything like that, and then they expect one video to blow up and get them all the business like for the whole year.
We all want the one hit wonder for sure, but I mean
that's just people that have a really unrealistic expectation and no real understanding of how marketing and SEO works, right? Like you don't just win by having one piece of content. You need consistent content and quality content and relative content.
Yeah. Like for us, it's kind of like the same thing you were saying earlier that like we're not like yes, we're trying to like sell people on like on marketing for their business, but we're not being too over pushy because it's more of like a consulting. Like, is this even going to work out for us? Because we also like want to work with people who want to better their business and grow their business. If we try to sell something to someone who really doesn't want to grow their business, then it's just gonna be like a one-off sale, and it's not gonna be like that good interaction between us.
Yeah, because that's the whole goal. Like with us, like if we want your business to succeed. That's the goal. You want me to get more attention span, more sales, whatever your business is. And if we don't have a budget, I made a video not too long ago, even just talking about. You should just have some sort of marketing. Even if it's with your phone, just do something for your business. Once you're ready to take that next level, then that's where we come in and we can help you. But I mean, if you're not ready, I mean, it's completely fine. Our business isn't for everybody. And I think that's the hardest thing for people to grasp.
You said something that I run into often, and probably in a different way than you. Like you said, like, what's your budget as a business? And I do a fair amount of loans for self-employed individuals. That's probably 40% of my book of business, mainly because I used to be an underwriter. So I know how to take apart financials and see what's doable and what works and what doesn't work. And it blows me away how many self-employed people have no accountant, no CPA. They don't know what their profit margin is. They don't know, like you say, I need a profit and loss because that's part of what a self-employed person needs for a loan. And they're like, well, what is that? And it's like there's something about the type of personality it takes to go out in the world and be like, I am going to be my own boss. I'm going to start a business that doesn't always go with, and I'm going to understand the numbers and have these things nailed down. And that's probably fine, right? When you're starting a business, when you're growing it, when your time and leverage is best spent on growth specifically. But when you get to the point where like now you have a healthy business and you want to buy a house, it's surprising to me that folks don't come back to it and say, okay, what are my numbers? How is my business performing? What can I do to make a difference? Because I guess like if I'm a business owner and let's say you guys are pitching me and you're like, hey, we're a marketing company. We can do these awesome videos. We're going to get more eyeballs on your business. Probably like the first question I'm going to ask is like, well, what's the return on investment, right? How much do I have to spend to get one client? And what's the time frame over which I'm going to get that one client? Is that 3 months? Is it a year?
Yeah.
Right? And it's different for probably different businesses, right? But understanding what you're spending and what you're getting in return is an essential function of being a small business. So if you don't have a budget, you don't have a profit and loss, you don't have a balance sheet, you don't know what your numbers are, how can you evaluate?
Yeah.
Right.
And then what, like that, you're talking, you don't have a, like me personally, I think that the people get stuck, and that's just my opinion. I think they get stuck there depending how successful they've been. Maybe they were just making 30 grand a year, just to say some numbers. And now they're making 100 grand a year. Their ego kind of gets to them, and they're like, I got this. I don't need anybody. That could happen. But then, like you, what do you think? When's that transition where you're like going and you're like, hey, I should get some, like you should be like, hey, I should get some, like create a team around me, to get like a CPA, give me my profits and loss, like.
Well, I'm a numbers person and I'm a nerd. So my answer to that question might be different than somebody that's wired a little bit different. But I don't know. I think at the point at which you are more than just a solo business, when you start to have employees, when you start to have real assets, when you start to have real income, then I think like the first thing that I would say, hey, go spend some money on is bookkeeping/accounting. Because then then you can every month look at what have I done, what's my revenue, what are my expenses, where do I need to make adjustments, do I need to change my budget, do I need to reallocate effort. It's very hard to run a business at much more than a survival level if you don't have some level of reporting coming to you to help you make those decisions, right?
And like in your experience, I guess, like, was it kind of like that when you for your business, like when you started hiring some people, you're like, hey, I need some help to control this? Or because I'm just going back to it, like seeing like small business. I mean, but small business, people think it's just a one employee, but small business is like with like under like 30 employees, like that's still considered a small business. But I think that's where most people get stuck, is trying to reach out, get help to actually grow. They think it's just going to be an expense, but
I think if you are a business owner and you look at essential services as negative, then you're kneecapping your growth, because having good numbers and knowing where you're at and why you're there and how to steer the ship is going to help you make better decisions, and it's going to increase your profitability long term. So I don't know of any business that's ever been successful at more than like a truly small business level that is not looking at the particulars. I don't know how you make really meaningful business decisions if you don't have the data.
Yeah, I feel like the whole like entrepreneurship thing just became popular over the last few years because entrepreneurship sounds fun, sounds exciting, and sounds like, oh, I can be my own boss. It's cool. But then like with the whole
time you can't make payroll, and then that's when it gets a little interesting or whatever.
Or like with the whole pandemic, like everybody was, or not everybody, like a lot of people were stuck at home, so they kind of like found other like side hustles to like be able to like make ends meet. But then those side hustles really aren't truly businesses. Like it's something they could do on the side, yes, but then like for example, like I see a lot of it with photographers. Just because they have a camera, they're calling themselves a photographer and marketing themselves as such, but then they want to charge what these actual professionals. If that's the standard,
then I'm a photographer too.
Yeah, exactly.
I own a camera.
Yeah,
okay,
and then like they want to be charging what like actual professionals in the industry are doing, but their work is nowhere near. So it's just like it's become like watered down, I guess you can say. And I'm sure that not to the extent as like as photographers, because like an easier industry to get into than mortgage lending, but like a lot of the people in the industry have been in it for a lot less years than you have.
Because I just to cut you off, sorry, but it's because I did some research. Like the average time of like a mortgage, everybody got to start somewhere. Mortgage lenders like 5 years. You've been in there for like almost 20 years, so it's like there's a difference. You start learning some different stuff.
I think
ways.
There's levels to the entrepreneurship game.
Yeah, I mean, I've known loan originators that are 3 years in who are exceptional because they dedicated themselves to learning and to doing it the right way. And so I don't know that it's just is easy as saying, hey, the more time in, the better. I mean, there's certainly people that have been doing it for 20 years that do it poorly, right? So there is like a lot depends on the individual. I think what, time gives you more than anything is that you've just seen market cycles. You've seen what's happened before. Like I entered the industry in 2003, first job after graduating college, right before the 2007 financial apocalypse. So I kind of like had a front row seat to that from the inside of a lender, watching everything, fall apart. And then the period after that, where home values are plummeting and people are upside down, and no one is really buying homes that much because they're unsure if I buy this house today, is next year going to be worth a lot less money. And so you've seen that, and you've seen rates come and go. You've dealt with all of the sort of fears and concerns that clients have that repeat. Right, that are consistent across the board. Is this the right move for my family? Is this too much? Can I afford this? Will this, the sky fall if I buy this house? Is 2007 going to happen again? I get asked that a lot. I'd love to talk about that a little bit at some point.
That's what I was just about to ask you, because you're talking about the times back then where
you lived through it. Like you had a little experience. You thought stuff was going good, and then I was a baby in the industry, right? So I wasn't viewing it from the perspective of, hey, I have tons of years into this and I really know what I'm seeing. But in a weird way, being new to it let me maybe see some of the things that people that had been in it a long time didn't, because, I'm 23 years old. I'm working as an underwriter. I'm making, more money than my dad, who works in a steel mill and has done that for 25 years and manages people and knows way more than I know about pretty much everything other than maybe mortgage lending. And I'm looking at the amount of money, right, that people are earning. And I'm looking at the people who are getting loans. And they're like people who I wouldn't lend my money to, right? Not that they're bad people, but just like from a financial metric standpoint, well, here's this person that works at McDonald's that says they make $100,000 a year and they're buying their second home. It's kind of like, is that legitimate? Let's start going applying to McDonald's, I guess.
Well, right, yeah. I mean, if McDonald's paid $100,000, we'd all work there. But just the ease with which you could get a loan, and the type of people that were getting the loans, and the dollar amounts on the loans, and the criteria required are getting easier and easier and easier, to where you have these so-called ninja loans, no income, no asset loans. Basically, they're a signature loan, right?
So with that, you're saying, it was so easy to people get loans, because I'm asking because you've seen the whole back end of the people's, I guess, financial stuff. People got COVID stimulus, and they're we know the price of everything went up. But people usually, if they're buying a house, they probably got a payment on a vehicle also. So it's maybe they can, it's not like dogging on them saying that they can't afford it. But kind of what I mean, because people in the last 2 years are oh yeah, everyone's getting stuff, but just
So here's the big difference, right? The number one difference between then and now, and this is what I tell clients, and this is why I say 2007 is never going to happen again. Not that something bad won't happen, it just won't be that. In 2007, do you have a pulse? Are you willing to sign paperwork and you have a loan? Yeah. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but pretty much that. And that was just because there was no regulation governing in particular subprime loans, which means people that don't have the credit to get a quote unquote conventional or conforming loan. And these loans are just getting handed out candy at a parade. And those loans failed to perform. Just lots of people defaulted on them. You have that going on at the same time that you have other sort of major strikes against the economy. And you have this cascade effect because of the way that they leverage that mortgage debt. And that's way more technical than we need to get into. But The Big Short, which is a pretty good movie, it's accurate in how it portrays
how it went down.
Yeah, the metrics in that movie, the way they show it, what they describe, 100% true. CDOs and trench debt and all of that. But
yeah, there's a lot into that. I'm pretty sure you've seen the boiler room margin call. the one we were talking about the other day is like IOUSA, that documentary. Like, I mean, it kind of goes on into depth like that, and then people are like, yes, it's a movie, but then they had to get the idea from somewhere to make that movie, you know.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Well, so you have all that, right, going on at the same time, and all of a sudden the plug in the bathtub gets pulled, and now all the water is funneling out fast, and you can just watch it go down. And it's lender after lender after lender is closing their doors. There was this webpage called the Implodometer, and every day you have like more lenders on the list of companies that have gone bankrupt. And none of that's going to happen now in any way, shape, or form, because after that, the regulation that was put in place, the creation of the CFPB, or Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, basically underwriting guidelines became consistent across the board. Subprime as a product class almost completely disappeared. And so everyone who has a mortgage right now, almost without exception, proved their income, proved their assets, right? They were run through an automated underwriting system. They met all the criteria required, and they are more or less good borrowers, right? And so the performance on those loans, like the default rate over the last few years, is the lowest it's ever been, which just means of all the people who took out loans, they're paying their loans. The loans aren't going into foreclosure. So like this time last year, I'm like watching YouTube, and you've got all these, I guess, like wannabe economists that are like, oh, housing crash, and get ready. You know, there's going to be this glut of foreclosures, and there's going to be buying opportunities, and listen to me because I'm smart. And they've been saying that for years, right? Not just last year. Last year's when it like kind of hit
15 or 16,
this shrill point. But yeah, 2014, 2015, there's people talking about this stuff. And I'm like, people don't foreclose when they have equity in their homes. Right? If you bought your house 3 years ago and it's worth 60, 80 grand more than it was now, which is true of anybody who bought a house in Colorado, why are you going to foreclose? Why are you going to let the bank take your house for like what you paid for it instead of the present market value? You're not. You're going to sell it. Or you have the equity to get out of that situation without a foreclosure. So that glut of foreclosures never appeared, which is exactly what I said. I guess the thing I said wouldn't happen didn't happen. And
on some of that stuff, I mean, stuff I read, I mean, like, you're the pro and stuff, but I want to like push back a little bit on some of the stuff.
No, please do.
Because it's like for the audience and for us to, I mean, to learn more. But it's like people can, like, all that stuff you're saying, like, it's completely true. But then there's like, inflation is like 9.1. If you see, it's the highest it's been in like 40 years. Like, it's different stuff has driven it to be at that point, you know. And then like foreclosures, they've been like, compared to last year, this year, it's like 700% like higher.
It's up.
But then it could be like the same thing. If you have one house and then it goes, obviously it's double, so it's 100%. So it just depends the numbers, you know. I guess it's like from 2,300 to like 23,000, something like that, you know. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know it's like 700%. And I mean, it like I said, if it goes from 1 to 2, it just doubled. Like, so it depends how much it, you know.
Yeah.
If it's 10 houses now, it's
70 houses.
Yeah, so but 70 houses isn't anything, you know, compared to I guess the numbers that they would be at. Yeah.
Well, you kind of gave part of the answer I was going to give, which just if you're at historic lows in terms of foreclosures, that if you increase at all, it looks like a big change in terms of percentage, even if it isn't a big change in terms of actual number of foreclosed homes. And to be clear, like, I don't think that like the housing market is so rock solid that it faces no threats and that everyone every time should go buy a house, right? Like, I don't think that. I think we are kind of in a position where I guess I am in a cautiously optimistic about the current housing market. Not rose-colored glasses, not, hey, beat the drum, everybody go buy a house. That's not me. I think there are some challenges, and you hit one of them, you know, which is just inflation and what the Fed needs to curtail inflation, which is bring rates up, which means what it costs in terms of the mortgage payment that you are going to pay at any given price point is higher this year than it was last year. Last year it was higher than the year before that. And if people are getting pinched on gas and groceries and, whatever, consumer goods, and incomes aren't rising in the same proportion, then affordability is decreasing. The amount of expendable income that people have is also decreasing. And that eventually that becomes a really big problem. And that could become a really big problem. So if I were like forecasting, what's the biggest threat to the housing market? It's simply that. It's that the Fed has really only one tool to combat inflation, and it's a sledgehammer. And they swing the sledgehammer and bring rates up until inflation falls in line.
But that's kind of the problem that I think that we've been seeing, that they're raising the rates and inflation is still going up. Because I believe in March it was like 4.
Yep.
From March to now, it's at 9.1.
We're 9.1.
So it's like, but in March the rate was still like at I believe it's like 3 around there. But so it's
still really low.
So this is going up and this is going up. So like, what happens? Like, I mean, what happens is it maybe that there was maybe too much. I think there was maybe too much money printed at that time that made inflation stay up more. And I mean, I think the interest rate was going to go probably up anyways. Like it was, it's cycles, it's waves that stuff goes, if you see it throughout history. But then the inflation is never coming down. So it's like, what's like next, I guess.
Well, I've got a little bit of a conspiracy theory, which I love those. I'll save for 1 second.
Perfect. I love them.
I guess to respond on inflation, well, like everything is kind of a rubber band effect in markets. And so if you think in terms of the stock market, people are buying based on what they think will happen in the future. And they're selling based on what they think is going to happen in the future. Like nobody has perfect information. The Fed doesn't either. And so they're in a position where like if you think like, okay, inflation is this wall that has some, might be 6 inches thick, it might be 4 feet thick. And they're swinging this sledgehammer by raising rates and trying to break through so that inflation comes back in line. They don't necessarily know how many swings of that hammer it's going to take to get through the wall. So they're going to just keep swinging. And
so that's kind of that's I guess the problem, like what you're getting at, like.
So you end up in a situation where they've raised rates more than they need to be raised because you're waiting for information that you don't have, which is like, how has this affected inflation? And usually what happens is you end up overreaching, right? That's why people sell too soon. Nobody can call the top of the market. It's imperfect. So what usually happens is you get in Fed action that outstrips what they actually needed to do because they didn't know. So they're in that position right now, right? Like here we've had these rate increases, inflation is still high. Is that because they didn't raise rates enough? Or is it because the effect of the rate increases that they already put in place haven't kind of like made their way through the larger economy? It could be one, it could be the other. If I knew the answer definitively, I would run a hedge fund.
Exactly.
So although that inflation has been like the highest it's been in 40 years, you still don't think it's going to be as bad as it was in 2007, 2008? Is that because like back then the inflation was more driven on like the actual housing market, and then this time around it's really not driven by that?
Well, in 2007, it was less a case of like, hey, inflation is hitting everything. It's like, gas prices were high. That might be a correlation. But, I don't know. Inflation wasn't at 8 or 9% across everything. It was home prices that really skyrocketed. And that was because of ease of access of capital. If it's super easy to get a loan, there's more buying activity. If there's more buying activity, then there's higher demand. If there's higher demand, then prices go up. So housing prices kind of ran way out ahead of where they should have been, and we've got homes that are overpriced by, in some markets, 50%. The parts of Florida, Las Vegas. You saw houses drop by 50% after the financial meltdown. We're not in that position. It's almost the inverse. It's like, if anything, housing is priced pretty close to where it should be. We might be a little bit ahead of where it should be, but in most cases, with the shortage of inventory, the prices are warranted. It's everything else that is moving against the consumer. Rates, gas, groceries, Home Depot lumber, whatever the case may be. That stuff is what's really pinching, how much people feel they have to spend, which then hits consumer confidence, which then means that people stop spending. And so you have potential that we hit, some kind of a stagflation scenario like in the 70s and early 80s, where people just don't feel that they have any money to spend, and they in fact don't. And so then kind of your assets just hold ground or retreat slowly. Well, the relative value of the $1 that you have to spend, it's now worth 90 cents and then 80 cents and then 70 cents. That's kind of like the worst case scenario. So if I'm like, hey, what's the worst case scenario? It's not, well, we have this total housing panic, home prices massively plummet, and everybody is screwed because of it. It's more like a slow cook instead of getting hit with a flamethrower, right?
Yeah, I mean,
it's not this like cataclysmic, everything is collapsing. It's more like, no, things are just getting gradually worse, and in some ways that is a worse scenario.
Yeah, I actually appreciate you like actually answering all the stuff we're putting out. We're not trying to put you on the spot, but we're just trying to kind of like learn from you because that's your industry. Like,
I will say this: I am not an economist, so these are my opinions. They're educated opinions, but they are opinions, and I could be wrong about more than one thing. And so I'm not trying to sit here for you or your audience and be like, well, hey, I am the sole source of information.
Yeah.
It's more like I think some of the perspectives that I have are valuable, and take what's useful and leave the rest.
Yeah. And even like when you're talking about like 1985, and like that time was way different to like it was now, because even if you go back in history, I believe it's like around 1985, interest rate was about 18%. So I mean,
right.
People now are like, it's from 2 to 5, 2 to 6. It ain't shit. It ain't anything yet,
It's still super cheap money.
Even in 2008, 2009, it's like not even like close, like if you actually go back to then. But then kind of going back to like the whole thing you were saying, like with people that bought a house maybe 3 years ago, they have a lot of equity. Mm-hmm. I'm only kind of going on the stuff that like,
and that's the conspiracy theory that I'll tell you about here in a second.
So it's like they've had a lot of equity. Because I mean, even I bought my house over 2 years ago, so I mean, it was good. But then I think the problem, if it were to occur, would be to the people that are buying houses now.
That's exactly right.
Because if it does go down, say you bought a house at $500,000, it goes down to like $400,000. You're
that doesn't hurt you because
I'm good because I bought it before. That's what I'm saying. The people. It's not going to be bad. And
you've
got
a rate that's way lower than the person who would buy your house now too.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I'm saying. And then I don't know if you guys know what's the ratio of what people make to the size of house they make.
Right.
Do you know what, like in 08? I don't know if you know, Eric. Do you?
No.
So it was like 8 times more. That was what people were buying. The average is, I guess, it's supposed to be like around 5 times more of what you make a year.
Yeah, depending on who you ask, I mean,
yeah,
Gordon,
depending on how you want to throw your money around.
Yeah, Dave Ramsey's going to be way more conservative than other folks, but yeah, like 2.5 times is probably super conservative. 4 is conservative-ish.
Yeah.
5 to 6 is where a lot of folks fall.
Yeah. So the thing, it was I guess like around that time, 08, 09, around that time, it was 8 times more.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit more.
Wow.
So actually, and then right now, if you actually look at it, it's 8.5 times more. Those are the stats like I'm seeing. And I mean, that's what...
That's a scary number.
That's a scary number. And that's why, like me, I'm just like, hey, I don't know. I just like to read a lot, like educate myself on stuff. But it's like, I don't know. That's just the stuff I'm reading. That's why I was like, we got to
those are really valid points. And that just gets back to affordability, which is like my big concern. That, like, let's say housing is just treading water. Prices aren't going up, nor are they going down. And rates are constant. Let's say it's just 5%. And so your average person buying a $400,000 house has a $2,800 mortgage payment, give or take. And that's consistent and unchanging. And then you've got gas, groceries, everything else, energy that this person needs in order to live. Those prices are all going up. Well, is the affordability of their house changing? No. But is the affordability of life changing? Absolutely. Right?
Yeah, especially if you got kids, you don't even know what the unexpected stuff happens. So
yeah, and healthcare costs and everything else. So if everything is increasing in cost, even if housing is staying the same, you still have a problem that's emerging. That's the one that I see. And like, you've got two solutions to it. One solution is what the Fed is trying to do, which is bring inflation in line, which comes with downsides, right? It comes with damage to the housing market, which I think will occur to some extent. And, Fed Chairman Powell said it, he literally in some of his notes was talking about how like the housing market needs, an adjustment, which is a polite way of saying home prices need to come down because affordability is getting out of control. So that's one solution. The other solution is that you increase wages. And
it's probably not going to happen. Honestly.
You and I are small business owners. I mean, it's not as simple as saying, I think I'm just going to give myself a 10% raise every year, right? Like, to keep up with inflation. For Fortune 500 companies, could they do that? They absolutely could do that, right?
For how? But then it goes like, for how long? Are
they going to?
Yeah.
Right. And the answer is, for most of them, no, because the shareholders would rather have higher profitability than ensure that the people working for them preserve their place in the economy. There's not too many sort of ethically grounded large corporations that really think about the people at the low end, which is, not to get political, but, when you've got CEOs that are making, 180 times the salary of the lowest paid employee, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Wages have to go up. So, in my mind, the Fed can do what they can do. Maybe from a regulatory standpoint, maybe we say, hey, we're going to cap CEO pay, or we're going to cap the percentage, the multiple of what they can earn versus the lowest paid employee. Or we are going to say, hey, minimum wage that we fight about all the time, and it's this political talking point. Well, let's stop fighting about it. Let's tie it to metrics. Let's decide how much does it take for minimum wage to actually pay enough for somebody to live in different metro areas. We know that the costs in San Francisco are higher than Denver, and Denver's higher than Chicago, and Chicago's higher than, Terre Haute, Indiana. So let's just look at what things cost, and let's make this data metric driven, and let's peg minimum wage to inflation and market cost. And then everybody can quit fighting, and we pay people enough to live.
So I guess, are you kind of like for like equality of pay, I guess? Because then I'm completely on with you. Like, you're saying, like, yes, they make too much, and like the CEOs and stuff, but then you could kind of counter argue it, be like, hey, well, I put in the work. Like, you put in it's probably 10, when you barely start, 10 p.m. and you're getting after it. You're putting in the work. And your employees are like, it's 5, I'm clocking out. I don't know your personal employees, but like employees for a company, like, it's 5 and I clock out. So it's like, there's kind of like a counter argument, I guess. Like, they put the work in, so they kind of.
I think you have to have a reward-based economy, or you don't have an economy. Right?
That's what drives innovation.
Yeah. That if you aren't rewarded for doing what someone else won't do, and taking on the extra effort and running a company and hiring people and training them and all of that stuff, you should be rewarded for that, right? That's harder than just showing up for a 9 to 5.
This is pretty much what capitalism is.
Yeah, right. I'm pro-capitalism. I don't think that the capitalism we have now is fair, and it is.
Do you think it looks a little more unfair because of the like inflation? Because too, we can, I'm just kind of looking at it from like an outside like scope. So it's like we want the pages to be, the wages to be the same, like in line, kind of like with what stuff costs.
I guess.
So it's like, what if what cost comes down instead of the wages going up? Because it can go like a whole different, like a rabbit hole. Be like, an employee tells you like, hey, I want to make $30 an hour. Be like, well, you got the qualities to make $15 an hour, so I can pay you 15, and then they can be like, oh, it's equality pay, kind of that.
Well, I guess I'll answer your question with a question. What's the purpose of a minimum wage? What's it there for?
That's a good question.
It should be in there for just getting your basic needs of survival.
The thing is, for basic needs now, people are just like, my basic needs went here, but you go to third world countries, a lot of people don't even have a car. They don't have ACs. They don't have they don't got the new phone. And here, that if you don't have that, you're like, they're like they're the bottom of the bottom. So it's just like, I guess, what do you compare it to?
Well, I guess you can't compare it to third world because you don't need a car to get to your job, right? Like we don't have infrastructure in most cities that makes public transportation all that viable for most people, right? Like Denver, public transportation here is trash compared to Chicago, where I am from originally. Chicago's public transportation is worse than Washington, D.C., that at least, some time ago was one of the best in the country. So if you need a car to get to the job, then a car isn't a luxury item. It might be if you're buying a stupidly expensive one, but just having the ability to get to work doesn't feel like a luxury item. I guess like if the minimum wage is to pay for the minimum, then we can quibble over what is the minimum, what is representative of like having your basic needs met, shelter, food, transportation that allows you to transact in the economy and have a job. Those feel like a good starting point, and you might set that boundary over here, and I might set it a little higher or a little lower, and we can hash out all of those details. But the fact that it's like this constant battle, and that both political parties, sort of bat it back and forth, and there's never a discussion of how do we make this concrete? How do we tie this to metrics? How do we make it so that whatever the annualized CPI over the last 12 months, at a minimum wage should go up by that amount. Otherwise, minimum wage is worth less and less and less. So it just feels like it is a soapbox to stand on and something to whip political fervor around, instead of trying to find like a concrete solution that is driven by math. If you wanted to attach it to something, you could. Inflation would be one thing that you could consider. There's probably 3 or 4 other things that you could tie it to. Maybe there's a number of them and all of them factor in. But nobody's talking about that because it's not politically expedient to say, hey, complex problems take complex solutions and there isn't a right answer. It's more like, let's get a better answer than we have now. That doesn't win votes. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's very right on, like what you said, like they just throw it at each other like on that and see what happens. And what you're saying, they have to sit down and hash it out, be like, this guy's like, he says it's 14, I say it's 16, I'm like, all right, it's 15, like something to, but someone's like, oh no, they're doing this, they're not doing this. They just kind of throw it at each other and see what happens.
I guess my undergrad degree is in political science. And so, I kind of like politics. I hate it, but I don't know. I like systems. I like thinking, how do you solve something in a systematic way, not in a, like, this makes us feel good way. And so if you want a systematic approach, look at inflation, look at cost of living, look at what are basic needs, what does it take in whichever area of the country you're looking at, find some way to measure that consistently across the board. We've got the data to do it, and just have minimum wage go up not when politicians cast votes for political reasons, but it goes up the same way that like Social Security benefits go up, right? Like we've tied that to metrics. We might say the metrics are bad. We might say it doesn't work the way it should, but it moves according to a core principle. The fact that minimum wage isn't tied to a core principle and instead is just completely arbitrary and driven by politicians who hate each other, to me, that's fundamentally broken, right? It's just a way to score points instead of how do we help the most people in the best way that promotes, as I agree with you guys, like that promotes giving higher level of effort for higher level of reward, but that doesn't punish the people who, for whatever reason, can't do that, right? Because you guys are smart guys and you looked at yourselves and said, hey, we can run a business, the same as me, right? But you probably have people in your lives that for whatever reason don't have that capacity, right? I have 2 younger sisters who are special needs. They can work. They could not ever run a company, right? Not because they're bad people, not because they're deficient in some sort of moral sense, but they just don't have the capacity. They don't have enough horsepower in their motor. So does that mean that they should be confined to like a subsistence-based living because they don't have, I guess, like the intelligence or the drive or the combination of the two? I guess to me that feels unfair. It's not like I think that they should live in a mansion and have parity with, I don't know, Bill Gates or something, because that's ridiculous. But being constrained to, hey, you are never going to have your finances secure. You're always going to live in fear. Inflation is going to put you in a position where you're choosing between, do you pay rent or do you feed your kids? That's the sort of thing that as a country, we need to come up with real solutions instead of political talking points. And to me, that's apolitical. I don't think that's about a party. I don't think it's about an ideology. I think it's just simply saying, hey, we are good enough. There's enough wealth in the wealthiest country in the world that we can make decisions where we can say, hey, you know what the baseline is? That somebody has a reasonably comfortable life. Right? Not a glamorous life, not you get the new iPhone every year that it comes out and you drive a fancy new car, but that you don't have food scarcity, right? You don't have the fear that you're going to end up in the street. Yeah,
for sure.
So sorry to get a little political good here, but I do care about this stuff.
No, and it's completely true how you're saying. Like, it's pretty much a celebrity contest to see who gets more votes or whatever,
And it's unfortunate because like politics do affect our day-to-day lives, like whether it's like right now or it's like a little bit down the road, like all that, like their policies and stuff will affect us sooner or later.
Yeah, I mean, we all suffer from bad governance and benefit from good governance, right? Like whether you know it or not, you're benefiting or you're being harmed by. And unfortunately, politics has become this this blood sport instead of hey, how can we incrementally make things better in ways that aren't sexy or glamorous and don't make for good theater, but that are improving lives in a measured and consistent way, right? If politics could get back to being more about science, data, and picking the best outcome among imperfect outcomes, we would all benefit a lot more.
Yeah, kind of that's all great what you're saying. I mean, I think it's hit right on you hit it right on the nail. But kind of going like, I wanted to ask you, you're a dad, you got kids. It's on the selfish level. How do you manage business with family time with your kids?
Oh man, that is such a good question. I'm privileged in that the work that I do allows for a lot of flexibility. I can work from home, I can work from my car, I can work from a Starbucks or the diner up the street. So I have the privilege of being able to spend time with them in contexts that maybe I'm not fully engaged, but I can be on the phone and taking them to their event or picking them up and responding to clients. So it's not like, my dad, he worked swing shifts. So, every 2 weeks he's working midnights, then he's working 3 to 11s, then he's working 9 to 5s. He has no control over it. And he comes home completely exhausted because he's doing really difficult manual labor in, a steel mill where the average temperature is like 90 degrees day in and day out, right? I don't have those factors either. So what I have and the choices that I have are a lot broader than someone in a situation like that. I think it's about prioritization, right? If you're a hungry, sort of driven person and you value success, it can be a slippery slope towards being a workaholic, towards, hey, I'm providing for my family more and more and more, like Breaking Bad style, like I'll do whatever it takes. And, this is for my family, when it really isn't. It's about you and your ego and, building monuments made of dollars. So I think you have to very consciously think about it. And you have to say, okay, it's a priority that I run my business well, but it's also a priority that I'm a good dad. And at the end of the day, which one do I value more? Well, I think it's being a good dad. So if I have to pick between being the best possible business person or the best possible dad, I'm going to pick the dad one every time. That's just me. Sometimes, you got to sacrifice the other way too, right? There's times where I will tell my kids, like, hey, you know what? Here's how it is. I really have to do this thing for work. But they can take that in stride because of all the times where I chose them instead. So it's a give and take. But I think if you choose your children, I don't think anybody at the end of their life is like, man, I wish that I had like an extra $500,000. If I just worked a little harder, I'd have an extra $500,000, and wouldn't that be great? But I do think a lot of people sit, in their final moments and regret that they didn't spend enough time with their kids or with people that they love or doing things that they were passionate about outside of work. So I guess if you can take a longer term approach and think about like, hey, am I going to be really happy with myself when I am 80, 90, 100 years old and I'm thinking about the way I live my life? That's, I think, the perspective you look at it through, not the day to day. Because then you can get trapped, right? You can become a fireman who's always responding to the thing that's burning, and your kids or the other really important people in your life get left in the dust.
So with all these like stats and stuff we were talking about, these are all like federal level like statistics and stuff. I'm not sure if Colorado would be like have a different response to what the market is doing. I don't know if it responds better, or responds worse, or responds about the same. But what would be some of like the tips you have for people that are maybe looking to buy or sell a home right now or whatever?
All right. Yeah. So you're right. National statistics are made up of individual markets, and those markets vary. And Colorado is a pretty unique market in a couple of ways. One is desirability. Right? Like the reason that home prices have run up in Western states in particular way faster than other markets is because the consensus of people who are looking at places to live is that Western states right now look really, really good. I think they look good because of quality of life, because of access to nature, because of, a dozen different factors. I mean, I moved my family from Chicago to Denver because I looked all over the place and I'm like, wow, Denver's a really cool city, right? And when I moved here in 2016, I thought, like, I'm overpaying for a house and I'm doing that, and that's okay. And it's an intentional choice because I took the advice I give clients, which is you buy a house to live in and to meet the needs of your family, not as an investment proposition, right? If it works out as an investment, great. But first and foremost, it's a house to live in. And home prices went up double digits year over year, every year from when I moved here. And that's the Denver market, right? Chicago, where I left, home prices have gone up a little bit, but maybe 10% overall versus here, 40, 60, 80%. In some cases, a doubling, right? In less than 10 years, home prices have doubled in some parts of Denver. So that's a distinctive factor. So what I ask clients is, given that there's not more land around Denver, everything that's buildable is either being built or soon will be. You are hemmed in by the Front Range on one side, sort of the Fort Collins / Loveland / Longmont metro area to the north, the Springs to the south, and then, Kansas Light to the east. Where is the housing going to come from? So there's a finite amount of places that you can either buy or develop. And if Denver and Colorado in general maintains its desirability and people still want to move here and they still are moving here, and you can't just build a ton more houses quickly and easily, what does that suggest in terms of supply and demand? And to me, it's that simple. There is demand that outstrips supply, and I think that that's a continuing and ongoing problem. So whether right now rates going up and other sort of broad economic factors bring house prices down for some amount of time, in my mind, that's a buying opportunity, because long term, I don't think that Colorado is going to get less desirable, and I know that there's nowhere else to put a ton more single family homes.
There's no more land also. So it's,
right. Yeah. So you're constrained, right? Like those two things aren't gonna change. I mean, could something happen where people are like, oh, I don't want to live in Colorado. That's a terrible place to live. Like, I don't know. What would that be?
I don't think that's anytime soon, honestly.
No.
I don't think so. Like even if there's like a change of like party affiliation with like, the governor or anything, I think it'll just still retain its level of desirability just because the location and the beautiful mountain views that there are, and just the whole like atmosphere that Colorado has.
Right. Yeah. The vibe, the energy, the access to doing, you know, cool and interesting stuff. I mean, cool people move to Colorado, right? Like I'm one of them. I don't know if I'm cool, but
You pass.
I'm glad.
Yeah,
I'm glad I moved here. Like I freaking love it here.
We'll give you the check. We'll give you the check. We'll give you the check mark on that one.
Are you guys natives? You guys Colorado natives?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But we're from rural Colorado, not from the city, just out east.
Where'd you grow up?
In Fort Morgan.
Okay.
So it's about like an hour east of Denver.
Yeah.
Just grew up there, and then we like grew up on a ranch outside the little town anyway. So.
Well, I am not a native, but I will tell you, like, when my family took, like, one of the very few real vacations we took, one of them was a driving trip from Northwest Indiana to Colorado, and we spent a week here. And when I was 10 years old, I absolutely loved it. And I was like, when I grow up, I'm going to live there. And it took me longer than it should have. I should have moved here before I did, but I've wanted to be here since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And
you're here.
Love it.
You're here now, so that's good.
Yeah. And my kids are as native as they're going to be. Like, we moved here when they were 2 and 4, so they weren't born here, but like their entire lives and realities and everything they can remember, at least for my younger of the two, is here. And
that's good.
yeah, and they got the hey, it's 28 degrees and sleeting, and I'm gonna wear shorts and a hoodie to school.
Go.
So like they're full blown Colorado.
That's the Colorado uniform.
Yeah, they've got the Colorado 10-year-old boy uniform on for sure.
There you go. No, that's great. And now with Nathan, I mean, if you guys that are listening, I mean, you're probably gonna have to listen to this stuff again. We hit a lot of really good topics. I mean, we appreciate you like going in depth, giving us a good explanation. You know, not trying to weed out the questions, you know, giving us an answer on everything. And
where could people find you?
So you can find me at nathanmortgage.com. I named my company Nathan Mortgage not because I'm a narcissist, but because if I'm having a conversation with somebody in an elevator and they can remember that my name is Nathan and that I do mortgages, they now can find my website, they know my email address, and so it's more about memorability than anything else. So Nathan at nathanmortgage.com is my email. nathanmortgage.com is my website. Little quick Google search, Nathan Mortgage, and I'm going to be first result.
Pops right up.
Yeah, we'll also like put it down in the description so people can check it out.
So you can start giving you calls and stuff with this market stuff. But no, yeah, guys, we appreciate it. I mean, if you have to watch some certain parts again, check it out, because we went into depth. We probably went a little too quick through them, but I mean, I think there's some good topics to actually research.
We're only, talking about the state of the U.S. economy, inflation, mortgage rates.
Just some small topics.
Just some really simple stuff.
Yeah. There you go.
For sure.
Well, and what I would tell you guys, and what I would tell your listeners or your watchers, is just what this is favorite part of what I do. And there's no question that I don't want to take a crack at answering for someone. And if I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. And if it's something I can find out, I'll find out. But yeah, if somebody's in the market for deciding if they want to buy a home, or they're looking for a home, or they just have questions, I would love to hear from them. And they'll get the best I have to give. And I also just wanted to say, thank you guys for inviting me to be here. Really cool what you guys are building, and I think it's awesome to be in the company of people looking to build something meaningful and to give back and to give quality. I think quality sells. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come down here with us and having this little chat. So I'll reiterate, like I said at the beginning, if we brought value to you guys, or if you found this podcast interesting, we'd appreciate if you can just subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, or just share it with one other person.
Share it, yeah, for sure. You got to share it with someone, because with stuff's going on now, I mean, this is pretty good topics for people, like we said at the beginning, to be educated in what they're doing, you know.
Yeah, it's relevant and timely, that's for sure. People have these questions are, you know, almost everything you ask me is stuff that clients are asking me every day. You know, what should I be afraid of? What's going to happen? You know, how are things going to play out? Should I buy? Should I not? Right? And that question is, I don't know. There's as many answers to it as there are people. So it really is about, like, what is your unique situation?
Yeah. Couldn't have said it any better. So, guys, with all that being said, just remember that an act of rebellion is to question.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Underrated, we the underdogs, underestimated.